Well, hello, friends. Welcome to the From Busy to Rich podcast. This podcast exists to inspire advisors like you to increase your profitability and also the quality of your life, but not just for you, also for those that you serve. I want to welcome back Justin. Justin, great to have you back for another great episode.
It's great to be here again, sir.
And Wes, you showed up again. We're grateful you're here.
I'm here. I did it.
Way to go. Hey, last episode I loved. I'm grateful for it. Sometimes I think great teachers and preachers and leaders, they're sort of talking to themselves in public, as they work through things. And I think that this is something that we all who are focused on self-improvement and being the best version of ourselves are working on and in the middle of the story. And so I know you thought a lot about this. You thought about the principle of the path. You thought about the importance of choosing the right destination. And so if you can just sort of recap last episode, and we're going to dive into how do you choose the destination? How do you measure? What do you do when you get off track? Things like that.
Great. Yeah, no, real quick. This is, title of this series is 90,000. Because that's the number of hours that, on average, someone in the United States that lives to age 72 is going to work in their total 622,000 hours on the planet. And what we talked about last time was that if we're going to spend 90,000 hours doing something, we want to be able to answer the question when somebody says, "Hey, how are your 90,000 hours going?" in the affirmative, to the extent that it depends on us, right? We want to be able to say, hey, we're super satisfied not only with the work we get to do, but the impact that it makes and the life we get to live as a result of the ripple effects that go all throughout. And we talked about how often the answer to that is not always great. It's not always satisfying. And that there are actual things we can do to put ourselves in a position where more times than not, we can answer that question, yes. More times than not, we can answer the question that we are super satisfied and we are grateful for where we're going, grateful for where we are on our way to where we're going. But it does require a lot of forethought. And it does require us observing some things, as we spent a bunch of time on last time. If you didn't catch that episode, you might want to stop now and go back and listen to that one and then come catch up on this one. But we talked about principle, the word principle, and what it means to us that said last week, principles is not a rule. A principle is not a rule you follow. It's not something you choose to apply. It's not a law or a rule you can break, because principles follow you whether you follow them or not. They apply to you whether you apply them or not, and you might not. It's not a law you can break, but they can break you if you can observe. You can either observe them and leverage them for your benefit, or you can ignore them for your detriment. And so what we want to do is talk about principles in our 90,000 hours that are going to help us make better decisions and live with fewer regrets and actually enjoy more of the life that we've been designed to live within that. And the principle we're specifically talking about, Andy, and we kicked off last week, was the principle of the path. And the principle of the path just says this, that direction, not intention, determines destination. That all across the podcast kingdom here that people are listening to today, everybody's got intention of having a better life. Everybody's got intention of making today better than yesterday, tomorrow better than it is today. But ultimately, it isn't our intentions that will determine that outcome. It is a direction that we move in. And that's where we began our conversation last week.
I think something that would be encouraging for those who are listening to remember is that if you find yourself in a place where you're just not happy with an outcome, I think that it's fair to say that wasn't your intention. In the same way that people don't, when people get married, they don't intend on getting divorced, right? When people start a business, they don't intend on filing bankruptcy, right? It's fair to say that we maybe didn't intend for things to happen, but we're not measured by our intentions. Funny little aside. I woke up this morning, getting ready to go to work. I look in our TV room and my son is asleep on the couch. And we have a rule. It's really simple. You don't sleep in the TV room. Because that means you fell asleep watching TV late at night, and we don't want our kids to do that. And I said, Samuel, what's our one rule? Like about, we don't sleep in here. I'm like, okay, well, you're here. And he's like, well, I was just watching TV and I fell asleep. I was like, bro, you have a pillow and a blanket. Like, it looked like your direction was
to fall asleep in the TV room.
To fall asleep. Your direction reached your destination. Like, you wasn't like, oh my gosh, what happened? This pillow, this blanket, what a shock. I fell asleep, right? So he's like, I didn't mean to. And I was like, actually, I think you meant to, right? And I just, his intention was to fall asleep. But I think that what's important for us to remember is that, one, to just be kind to yourself. Maybe that's not intended where you didn't intend to go there, but also take responsibility and say, you know what, but what I did got me here. Yeah. And the good news is what got you there, you can stop doing those things, and you want to go somewhere else, and you got to do different stuff. And I think that's where rubber hits the road, right? And intention meets actual action instead of intention. Because you can't say, oh, I meant to say happy birthday, or I meant to say happy anniversary, but I forgot. Like, those intentions are not going to fly, right? I meant to work out today, right? I meant to cold plunge. I meant to pray. I meant to, I meant to, or I wanted to, or just they're not even close to I did, right? So I have in my notes here, being honest about your current situation, being honest about where you are, right? Because if you want to reach a different destination, really the first question you have to ask is, where am I? Justin, you shared a story about how you got some advice that really helped you in sort of an interesting way, that helped you track where you are, and how that really helped you get to a different destination. What was that situation for you?
Yeah, I hate to have to go back to physical fitness stuff, but that was a pivotal thing for me, just in developing a lot of nuances that I brought into other aspects of my life. I had the fortunate opportunity to train under somebody who's now in the Hall of Fame in powerlifting. And one of the first things when I was...
It wasn't me. It wasn't me, just letting everybody know.
Just to clarify, Wes has not yet gotten the call, but, anything.
His name's Scott. So yeah, different guy. Close resemblance, though. I think lifts are pretty similar, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Very same style.
One of the first things he told me had nothing to do with like lifting form or anything like that. One of the first questions he asked me is how I was tracking things. Like, how was I looking back and keeping track of where I was and what kind of journaling I was doing on my lifting? And I said, well, none. Right? Like, I show up and kind of how I feel. I try to get stuff done and figure out what I'm going to do that day, and then I do it. And he's like, well, that's problem number one. He's like, without an idea of where you want to go, and then a way of tracking your progression, you'll have no idea whether or not you're on track to hit it. And since then, I have kept a journal of every workout, and now I'm almost 30 years. I have every single workout I've ever done journaled, how I did, things that impacted it, how I was feeling. And that honestly was one of the biggest, I think, benefits to helping me to hit numbers I never would have hit otherwise. And then also just as an advisor, like, help me do things as an advisor that I never would have been able to do if I wasn't applying those same concepts.
I think one of the difficult things is that people don't try to, because one of the hard parts of measuring something is you have to be honest with yourself, whether it's weight or strength or dollars or relational, like, you want to figure out the truth of your relationship. Ask the person you're in a relationship with, how are we doing? How am I doing? Right. And so it's ignorance is bliss until that ignorance is a train that was coming down the tunnel and you just weren't paying attention. Right. And it's those things that, what is that? It's not urgent, but it's important. Well, those things you ignore will become urgent and important. They'll become an emergency. And I think about that. I think about the gap between intention and action. And I just think that the very best thing you can do is say, this is who I am and this is where I'm at. And that really is. I think I mentioned this in a prior episode, but with all the groups that help you with overcome addictions of any kind, the very first step is admitting where you are. And when you do that, you actually have made progress, right? When you said, this is where I am. I'm addicted to this. I'm I'm not happy. Good. Thank you for stop lying to yourself and the other people around you and saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like that's actual progress versus how you doing? I'm fine.
Yeah.
Who's doing anything about I'm fine? You know what I mean?
Well, we spoke a little bit about this last week, and is one of the things, having just had hundreds and if not thousands of conversations by this point with advisors, and somebody is in a place where they're like, I'm just not satisfied with how things are going. I'm not happy and enjoying things. And then the further question is like, well, what do you think things should look like in order for you? What would have to be going on in your life every week for you to be experiencing what you think would be fulfilling and happy? And that's kind of like last week, why this is an equation, right? This principle is an equation. It is direction determines destination. And so starting with that end in mind, starting with, all right, and we said 3 years from today, what does a great life look like? What are all the things in all the areas of life I care about? What did I get? And then what did I become in the process of what I pursued? Which is pivotal, but it's not enough. Because then you it's like, that's great. I've got to get, now you have clear intention, which is the starting point. You got to have clear intention, right? But direction, not intention, determines destination. Clear intention is like, all right, here's where I want to end up. But to get there, I need to be doing things that are going to put me moving in the direction of that destination. And that's where the rubber kind of meets the road here, where we can reverse engineer life and create milestones. I loved, in the kind of the pre-game for all this, we were workshopping it, and Justin had brought up, when you're on a football field, there are lines marked on that football field letting you know where you are relative to the goal.
Yeah.
And so
it will always influence your play calling.
It absolutely, it determines.
It will say, I'm here. I need to do this. For those who watch the Super Bowl, the advantage, I think about this from a really strategic standpoint, it was actually a disadvantage for the 49ers to go first in overtime because they didn't know if they needed 3 points or 7 points, and they got 3 points. And what do you know, that wasn't enough. Like Kansas City knew we need 7 points, to win. And they knew that they could react differently. They could do, their direction was different because their destination was really clear. Right. And I think that the challenge, guys, is that, I don't know if I'm at the 45-yard line or the 30-yard line unless I'm really paying attention to my life.
Right.
So when people say, how are you doing? I think one of the ways to know, Andy, Wes, Justin, like, how do I know if I'm clear in my direction, if I'm clear in my destination? Then I would just ask the question, well, do you know where you are right now compared to where you want to be? Justin, you actually mentioned something recently, and we'll leave the name of the group out to protect the guilty, but some pretty high achievers who just couldn't answer this question.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was fortunate to be part of a coaching conference that was geared towards entrepreneurs, and everybody in the room, we're talking 50 plus entrepreneurs that were all high level entrepreneurs doing very well from a business standpoint, personal income and just revenue of the business, that all could identify problems and obstacles and things like that. But when we sat back and said, what would a solution look like, or what would a year down the road, if everything were perfect, what would that look like? It was interesting to hear how many crickets were in the room. It was much harder to define. And even some of them looking at the end of their life, like there was one of the projects or little group task thing that we did was kind of like figuring out a year that you wanted to live to, an age you wanted to live till, and what that would look like and what you would have accomplished. There were a lot, and I mean at least 50% whose numbers were like 60.
What?
65. No joke. Yeah. And then there was
12 years old. When I was 12, I wanted to live this.
No. It was just,
I was dead by.
Yeah, just because they could not. They had not sat back and looked at a path forward because they got so busy, caught up in doing their business, of having this vision for launching their companies, and they did really well at that. And now they're just they're not paying attention to where they are and redefining where they want to go. They hit it, their initial ones, and they haven't redefined that and sat back what would a solution look like? What is the right next path for? And they're just continuing to function on autopilot, and it's not fulfilling and life-giving. You see some of them looking at potentially turning off a multi-million-dollar business just because it isn't that anymore for them.
Wow. I will say this is a word of sort of clarity. And I mentioned this a few episodes that one of the greatest mentors of my life recently passed away, and it was very, very sudden. Like he found out he had cancer, and within 45 days, and maybe 60 days, somewhere in there, he was with Jesus, and it was very, very fast. And his father had lived to 99, and my friend Dan lived in his mid late 70s. Point is, he knew his destination, right? He was very clear about what his destination. He was very much on a direction of, I'm going to love my work. I'm going to live every day well. I'm going to take time to be with my family. Like, his direction was great. Did he live as long as he thought he was going to live? No. But because his direction was very clear, his journey was phenomenal. So this is not that you're guaranteed the destination. It's that you're on the journey and you're enjoying the journey. Because I think there is something where people ask you all the time, how you doing? And most people just go, doing fine, doing good. Really? Like, really? And it's like, usually, no, I just don't want to talk about it. Right. So Wes, help us understand how being honest about where we are, how important that is. And then what do people need to start to do to point in the right direction?
Yeah, so I think there's a handful of things here that we can end with and talk about. Is once you've made the decision of what you want that destination to be, call it that 3-year destination of what does a year in the life of me look like out that far, a week, a month, in all the critical areas of life I care about. I think then what you have to do, and you have getting and becoming goals. What are the values that I embody at that stage? What are the things that I have? Then you get the milestones that we talked about. You get the yard markers along the way. Say, hey, all right, so if I'm there, then reverse engineer, what do I need to do trajectory wise to where maybe it gets really close to where I am right now, which is, all right, 3 months from now, in light of where I am, and being really honest, and sometimes with the help of a good coach or a community of people. If you present, here's what happens. If you've got people that you're willing to let speak in your life, and you say, look, here's where I want to end up. And then you back down and you say, now here's where I feel like we are right now. And here are the things that we alone control, that I alone control, that I alone am going to do, or that my team, we alone control, that we are going to do, that are going to, I believe, give us the best possible opportunity to move us in the direction towards that close milestone. And then what's great is if you have a community of people, particularly some that maybe are further down the road than you, that can come in and say, yeah, those 3 things are good, but maybe this one it's a waste of time. We had a really good call the other day with a lot of advisors, and a really, really great advisor, great spirit about him. He's like, hey, how important is it for me? I've been in the business for 4 years, and I'm engaged. I'm signed up for Transform. I'm going to engage in this class. How important is it for me to do my website? And I said, that can be important, because I'm thinking about spending a lot of time and a lot of money on this right now. And as we walked through, I said, well, of all the things you could do right now, let me just tell you, you are the product. You ultimately getting you better and more becoming a better offer to the marketplace that you're in. If you ultimately say you want to end up here, which is you're going to go bring a holistic fee-based financial planning practice, and today you're selling products and you're not charging fees, that you going through and giving time and energy and money to a course that's going to get you there is a whole lot better than going and refreshing your website. It just is a way better use of energy and time and money. And he's like, that makes a ton of sense, and totally follow along. So I think having outside people looking in that you're willing to let speak into it is a really critical thing. But being really clear on where am I, and ultimately where do I want to end up, and then have milestones along the way. I think what we're going to begin to do, Andy, because this is a basic framework, right? The direction determines destination, is over the next several weeks, we're going to give some very specific tips and tricks of people that as a destination, they would like to arrive at the place 3 years from today where they're running a holistic fee-based financial planning practice, where they're being paid for their advice. And as a byproduct, they're still managing money. They're still putting in place protection where it needs to be, but they are the product. And they have team members that are a part of their team that are fulfilling areas that, one, they don't like and they're probably not that great at, to allow them to spend most of their time on things that are the highest quality activities for the organization. and they don't find themselves there today. Maybe they find themselves as a team of one or a team of a few. And there's just little things. If you know now to put in your path, to put as mile markers along the way that are going to make that journey from where you are to that place you're trying to get a whole lot more fun, and you're going to take a whole lot less wrong turns along the way because the path is already there.
Let me end with this. I hope it brings maybe a little levity to this. I don't know how many people watched Dumb and Dumber before. It's one of cinematic's greatest films ever. The scriptures are written on my heart as a Christian, but also that movie is deep and dear to me.
I like it a lot.
What's that?
I like it a lot.
I like it. Oh, shit. I'm remembering the scene where Jeff Daniels falls asleep and Jim Carrey drives through the night. And he's like, "Oh man, thanks for driving." "Oh, no problem." And then they make a line about John Denver, which I can't say on our show because
John Denver's full of poop, man.
That's right, because there's no mountains, and I think they're in Kansas or something. And he's like, "You drove," and the next scene cuts to them standing by the side of the road, dejected. And he's like, "You drove 4 hours in the wrong direction." You know what I mean? And it's funny until like that's your life. And you're like, "Man, I've been busy. I've been driving." And man, and listen, my intentions were good, but you're like, we are not going the right way. We are not in Colorado. All right. And so I hope that those who have listened to this will just be kind to yourself and recognize that intentions are not working. And maybe the direction you're going is not where you want to be going. But we want to help guide you in choosing the right destination and then choosing the right steps to take on a really practical level. And that's what our next few episodes will talk about. They'll talk about really practical things you can do to start to choose that right direction, destination, I should say, and start getting yourself in the right direction. So as always, Justin, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you.
It's great to be. Thanks.
And Wes, thank you as well. Always fun to be with you. And look forward to having you all back with us next week for another episode. Thanks for listening.